Friday episode of the Donovan Bandits. I'm Orrin Phillips, and we have a heck of a way to start off the first Friday in May for you today because we have Guy Gilchrist on. A lot of folks know Guy because of his time with Jim Henson and doing the drawings for the Muppets, Muppet Babies, the Muppets cartoon strip, and many other Muppet related things. That is his bread and butter. He's also worked with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, a lot of other comic books and cartoons he's done work with as well. But he is such an amazing guy. You'll find that out as the interview goes on. But one story I told him that I just wanted to share here too is I got to see Guy at Terrificon last August, and I saw the fans lining up for him was a much different experience than maybe we line up for other artists and writers there because his work meant so much to people. People had, all sorts of things for him to sign, either, plush dolls or drawings, even guitars. And when they saw him, they got to talk to him. They were so excited and they just wanted to tell him how much he meant to them. And I think that's an experience that you don't find as often in comic books. And it's just a credit to Guy and the work he's done. So enough of me talking about Guy. Here's Guy himself. Mr. Guy Gilchrist, sir, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you, Arn.
So we'll start from the very beginning. How did you first discover comics?
Well, the first comics that I ever saw were in the newspaper. My mom was a waitress and she worked in a diner, and every day, the funnies would be delivered for free. And she would open up the funnies, and even if I couldn't read them, she'd say, Guy, draw all of this. I think it was her way of keeping me occupied and not getting fired. So those were my first comics.
And how did you decide, maybe I want to pursue a career in not just comics, but in art in general?
Well, my motivation came from I found that when I drew, it made people happy. We were very poor; we didn't have a lot, and so if I wanted to make a gift or whatever, I would draw. It made people happy. That made me happy. That's always been my motivation, is that it makes me happy, and it made other people happy. As far as pursuing a career, well, as I said, so my mom would worked in this diner in a tiny little town called Winsted, Connecticut. And at 4 o'clock every day, we didn't have a TV. So she would walk me across the little street to the appliance store where Walter Lantz would be on TV with the Woody Woodpecker show. And just like my mother, who was a very good artist, would do draw ovals and stuff and say, oh, see, we can make this Bugs Bunny. And if we do this, we can make this character. And she was teaching me that. Well, and you can still watch these on YouTube, the intros for these things. Walter would come on before he would show the Woody Woodpecker and Chilly Willy cartoons, and he would draw. And he would talk to you about drawing. And I looked at my mom and said, I'm going to be a famous cartoonist like Walter Lantz. I'm going to go to work for Walter Lantz. And, that was it. There was no question. I understood that he could make a lot of people happy at the same time. And also that, he had a studio of people that all drew like him. And so this was definitely what I was going to be doing.
I want to definitely talk to you about different points in your career, but overall, as an artist, can you look back at certain projects you worked on as sort of milestones in the sort of growth of you as an artist and the evolution of you as an artist?
Oh, sure. Well, the first thing that would have been a major thing for me, well, when I was 10, I wrote to Walter.
Yeah.
And I sent him all of my art, and he wrote me back. The most famous animator in the world, he wrote me back on nothing. and told me that I had a lot of talent for a 10-year-old boy. And if I kept it up and kept practicing and I never quit, that someday all of this was going to happen. He said, someday you will be a successful cartoonist. When I was 16, I got my first job drawing Disney for Whitman Publishing. It was a Pluto coloring book for Whitman Publishing, and John Solardo gave me that job in New York City. Uh, so those would be two big things. But one of the huge things that happened to me was there was a man named Ray Callahan that had he was a artist, and he ran an ad agency, but it wasn't a usual advertising agency. It was a graphics and ad agency, basically, that worked for the West Hartford Board of Education. And I lived in West Hartford, Connecticut. And I went and saw him, and he gave me a job when I was around 12 years old. I became an apprentice to him to learn how to work in a professional ad agency. We did the graphics and things like that for all of the tests and the AV stuff and everything for the school system. And so that taught me a lot, and it gave me a mentor, someone that could say, Guy, whatever ad agency you go into, or whatever art director you talk to, if you don't know the terms that they're using, can you do this? Just say yes, that you can, so you get the job, and then come and show me, and I'll tell you the procedure that you need to do to be able to complete the job. And that was huge, for me. So so before there was any sort of national fame or anything like that, these were the stepping stones that I could point to that got me going at such an early age. One of the things that I get asked all the time when kids, parents, etc., how do you get into the business? And we start talking about being driven, and planning out what our goals are and all of that other sort of thing, in addition to, of course, being able to draw well and always progressing, and educating yourself in the art forms. But in order to get somewhere, you have to know somebody in this and that. No, you don't. you know you will you will, if you keep on moving forward.
I'm kind of blown away that a 16-year-old kid gets a job at Whitman Comics doing a Disney book. Did you
Yeah,
have any pressure at the time, or were you just so elated to be working that it didn't really weigh on you?
that's a good question. I don't remember any pressure. The only pressure that I had was a huge guy that weighed about 400 pounds, and it was basically all muscle, had broken into my room at the tiny little uh, rooming house above the Port Authority that morning
Ooh.
in New York. I don't normally wouldn't remember the exact day, but I know because it happened that day. And he let me live, so that was nice. He went rifled through everything, and there wasn't really anything for him to take, and I didn't really have very much money, but I did know that I couldn't go back there. And so when I was walking down the street and I went into this building, and I knew Whitman Publishing published Warner Brothers, Walter Lantz, Universal, and Disney. And I went in there and met Mr. Solardo, who became a guardian angel in my life, by the way, other stories. But I met John, and John said, so, and he liked what I did, and he was looking at all the Disney stuff that I had. And when he said, so can you do about 23 pages of this in about 3 weeks? I would say no. I said, no, sir. And he said, well, you need more time. I said, no, sir. And because he was showing me style guide pictures, model sheets. Oh my goodness, I felt like cheating. And I wasn't going to be doing the cover; I was doing interior pages. And he said, "So you need more time?" I said, "No, sir." I said, "Would I be able to do these today?" And he said, "You can do all of this today." I said, "Well, I don't know, but I'll try real hard." And so he delved into it a little bit further. He found out what the situation was, that I wanted to try to do it all day, and I would sit out in the park and do it if I had to, on my big portfolio thing, and draw and walk in and show him the art and whatever, and try to get it okayed, and do as much as I could that day. He said, "Well, here, why don't you use that desk over there?" And so he allowed me to do that, and I wound up like sleeping at the desk, waking up next morning, continuing on, and he was blue lining me, and approving my stuff and everything. So I got done in a few days, in 2 days, and then went home. He paid me, and I went home. So I remember the elation of having the job. I remember signing the contract and having no problem with, you're not going to have any uh, credit.
Mhm.
It's a Disney project. And I went, "Well, yes, sir. Freddie Moore doesn't get any credit. Ward Kimball doesn't get any credit. I understand, sir. Yes, sir." And I was very, very happy to have the job. I didn't want to disappoint them. And I want to get out of New York in one piece.
Whitman it's a company that you don't hear very much about anymore. What was
Well,
your
they were owned by Western Publishing.
right?
With Western are the same thing, and Western Publishing is Dell Comics
Mhm,
and Golden Books.
mhm,
And then, yeah, Whitman. Sometimes they call Whitman the Canadian Western because Western had two printing plants, one in Canada and one in Racine, Wisconsin. But it was all basically all connected to Dell and to Gold Key Comics,
mhm.
Dell Comics. Those were all comics I had as a kid, besides Batman and Flash and all that.
Now, doing some research on you, I know you also did some work, independent comic books as well. Uh, what was the independent scene like, and how are you getting your books out there?
Well, as a teenager, I wasn't getting my books out there. You mean like early on,
Yeah.
or the stuff that I did later on in my career when I was publishing my own stuff? I presumed, or I asked.
Yeah, I was gonna say when you were publishing your own stuff and early on too.
Okay, well, early on, I wasn't publishing my own stuff. I was trying to get work,
Okay.
and Vaughn Baudet, who at the time was very famous in the sort of underground community. He did a comic called Cheech Wizard that was in the National Lampoon and worked with the Grateful Dead and stuff like that. Uh, he took an interest in me and introduced me to some people that did what were called underground cartoons at the time, underground comic books. Well, I was grateful for the opportunity, and some of my work was printed in those things, but it was almost impossible to flag them down and get paid. And so I did a couple of things, and then in that world, and then said, well, I'm probably be better off working for some of the street, hip newspapers and things like that, because they've got an office. They're not fly by night. Where you're mailing into a post office box and praying for a check. Uh, guys like early on in those days, people like Charlton Comics, of course, they paid very little, but they paid you. And so, getting a job inking something for them was cool. because you knew where to find them and you knew you get paid. Much later on, after the Muppets and after all of that, and when I was established, uh, if I ran into a comic proposal that didn't get taken by anyone, by one of the big syndicates, I would publish it myself. If I had a book that went out of print, meaning a children's book, a color children's book, or a black and white children's book that went out of print, I would print it myself. And I've always been entrepreneurial in that regard. And the most important thing to me was, getting it out there. And I have a lot of experience in, being a self-marketer and promoter. So that's really not an issue. And but I would always exhaust my connections with the various established publishers first. And then if I truly believed in the thing, then I would go independent.
Did you find more freedom doing your own thing like that?
No, no, that wasn't it. Uh, I'm not one of those guys that says, "Oh, the gatekeepers won't let me do this and won't let me do that." I'm not that guy. I've been lucky in that uh, the way that I chose to move my career forward was that I wanted to be someone that no matter what they did, if I ever had children, which I did early on, that my children could look at everything that I did and be, and think, hey, they could see everything that dad did and maybe, have a little pride in that. Uh, so it was not one of those things. I didn't ever want to do dirty books or anything like that, or and I don't bring politics into what I do, things like that. So no, it was more or less a matter of I felt that creatively this was a good thing that, and I had very good responses from, let's say, the syndicates, the comic syndicates, if I was trying to syndicate something. But they said, it's just not going to work for us. But Guy, this is beautiful, or I really like what you're doing here, or this is a very interesting thing. It wasn't an ego-driven thing. It was something that I would say, well, for instance, with Mud Pie comic that I did, I said, well, I always really enjoyed those Floyd Gottfredson Mickey Mouses in the 30s and 40s, where it was an adventure strip with funny animals. And I loved Pogo. Pogo is my favorite comic. And Walt could do, 3 and 4 week arcs, But when I wanted to do that in the 90s, it was like, Guy, we love this, but go back 50 years and somebody else and we'll take it, And I said, well, no, I'll just do it now. Because if it wasn't going to work, if I truly didn't think it was going to work, the editors of the newspapers were going to tell me it was not going to work. But if they were willing to accept it and pay for it on a weekly basis, then I knew I had something there.
Most definitely. I will talk about the newspaper strips in a moment, but I know you did a lot of the writing for Nancy. How do you write for a strip that's going to reach such a broad audience? How do you put things in such terms that the random person picking it up can be part of the story? You didn't have to be from the very beginning.
Well, I learned very early on in comics because my first job in comic strips with Jim Henson, and Jim gave me the entire Muppet Show to be the writer and artist on. I brought my brother on as a writer as well. and I had him color. I taught him how to color the Sundays. He did a wonderful job with all of that. But I was immediately tasked with the idea of writing characters that the whole world already loved,
Mhm.
that moved, had color, had music, and we're not going to have, music and voices. So I had to caricature all of that and hope for the best with things being printed the size of postage stamps. So I had, and our readership on the Muppets comic, because we are the only comic that there ever was. By the way, there was a Muppets comic strip that started in 1981. I auditioned in 80 and it ran through 86 during the 10 years that I worked for Jim. Uh, Jim had the idea that unlike any other comic strip where it's written in English and then 2 weeks later it comes out in Spanish and French and then it gets mailed around the world, and you can translate it anytime you want in all the different languages of the world and run it whenever you want. Jim said, "No, I don't want that. The Muppets belong to the world. So whatever guy writes that I'm reading here in the Daily News in New York, if I'm in Athens, I want to read that. If I'm in France, I want to read that. I want to read the same story, the same cartoon that he wrote all around the world." And we found a way to make that happen, but it was almost impossible. But it's fun to do the impossible, like Walt Disney says. And so we were being read by 150 million people every single day in every language in the world. So when that's your initial entry into the world, by the time I was doing Nancy, my main thing with Nancy, and I understood Ernie's humor, very visual, and I understood the characters, and I understood my assignment that I accepted. Uh, it was mainly uh, finding the right art style and imitating Ernie for a time and bringing it back, to that 1940s 50s style of art that he had, which was not my usual style. I'm more of a Walt Kelly-ish kind of a guy. If you're familiar with my art, I'm a funny animal kind of a guy,
Sure.
and I don't really use a ruler, and I brush my lines and all of that. And of course, Ernie's uh, very stiff in his art, and so I'd find that voice, that. So that was the difficult part. The writing, uh, I understood. I read a lot of his stuff. I understood how he wrote, and so and he's a very talented guy, and I, liked what he wrote, and so the way that I babysit icons
Mhm.
is that I I become two people. I become you, the reader, and I try to become the spirit of the creator. And then I try to figure out, as the spirit of the creator, and what do I want to say up here? Okay. Um, I'm trying to get in his head or her head. I'm trying to get into that head. But I'm also looking at it as you, the audience, and saying, and what do you expect? And what are you comfortable with? And what do these characters mean to you? And so then I find my place as that vessel to bring that to that. And that's where I go.
Makes sense. I'm definitely going to jump to Muppets in a moment, but we've spoken to people who have worked on comic strips, and
Hmm.
it is a grind from
It is.
that. It's a machine that just keeps going and going and going. Could you talk a little bit about what it takes to work on a comic strip and all the work that goes into it.
Well, yeah, therapist, a great therapist, uh, very understanding everyone in your life. Um, yeah, Hank, uh, Hank Ketchum called it a prison. You know, through Dennis for 60 years, and I understand why. Life happens, you know, people pass away, you get ill, all sorts of, you know, the challenges of life happen. And then there are all the joys of life, the holidays and the get togethers and the vacations and all of that sort of thing. But no matter what is happening in your life, there's a little spot in the newspaper, and that has to be filled 365 days a year. And you don't just write 365 jokes and go, cross your fingers and hope they're something pretty good. You're writing thousands of things before you come up with where you're going to go in the paper to the best of your ability. And you're not just writing, you also have to draw it, and you have to, and there are deadlines and all of that. And imagine if you could never, ever, ever call in sick to work, you know. So it is a huge thing. I'll tell the saddest sort of thing. When my mom passed away, and she was in a coma for 30 days before she finally left me, every day I would take care of her or watch over her in the hospital, and then go back to the hotel room and be funny for you. And the thing that saved me in that situation, and I did Nancy for almost 23 years. The thing that would always save me was remembering this. My job is to make you happy. The thing that I love is making you happy, and that does make me happy. And I would be absolutely heartbroken if you opened up the paper and it wasn't there for you. And so I would compartmentalize my feelings and my emotions. And then I would open up the drawer that says, what do we have for you today? And I would immerse myself in that to the best of my ability and do the best that I could. And then off it would go. I had a studio manager years ago that said to me, I don't know how you do this, because the first thing that you say after you find out that a friend of yours passed away, or that mostly that, is, oh my gosh, I have to get 2 weeks of Nancy done in the next 2 days, because then I have to leave, you know. And because it was, that's longer. 23 years is longer than some of the people hearing this podcast have been alive.
Yeah.
And so that sort of puts it into perspective. Uh, so I enjoyed it. Uh, I am happy that I had that voice for all of those years. I do not miss it. There were a lot of things that I could have done when instead of doing that. But it brought a lot of people, happiness. It does take a considerable amount of your life. It does. But so, with everything, time is the most precious commodity on earth. It's the one thing we can never get back. You and I spending time together is of value to both of us. We're sharing that. So so the price that you're paying is all of that time, you know. Um, and so everything costs something. And so that's usually the cost is your time. Uh, so when you are given an opportunity to be a professional, one of the things that you need to say when you're looking at your goals is, there's no free lunch. So what are you willing to pay? And I look at it in terms of time, because that's the most important thing.
When you're writing a strip, do
Mm,
you have a start and an end point in your
mm.
mind that was chopping it up to fill the spaces, or do you just kind of keep rolling with whatever you feel like doing for each story?
Uh, no, uh, neither.
Okay.
Number one, there is no end to a comic strip. It's the never-ending story. There's never an end. You can have a story arc, but there's never an end. The minute that the arc is done, another thing is starting. Most of the comics that I've done are called gag-a-day, which means a joke every day. And so you can have themes. Let's say Sluggo finds a street cat and takes it in. And so it's for 2 weeks. We're following that. And then that could be followed by 3 weeks worth of gag a day, unrelated stuff that is all about all of the other characters that are in the strip, mostly Nancy. You see, there's a huge difference now in comic strips versus when I began. It's called the internet. And the internet is a huge thing because now you could, if you wanted to, go and read 5 years of my Nancy comic that I ended, my term on quite a few years ago now. But you could go read 5 years of it on the website at Universal, UClick. But back in the day, you would get the paper each day. The only way you could ever read anything from the past was to buy an anthology, all those little paperbacks, Uh, so, uh, so that's why story strips went out of business and there were only a few soap opera strips left because editors knew that sometimes people missed the paper, they didn't read it, and they also wanted to, no matter what, you could open up the paper and understand what was going on each and every day. These days, you can go and read a month's worth if you don't, come in on any day. But back then, there was no such thing. So I was always being discouraged from having story arcs go too long. Even when the website started in Nancy, back with Muppets, absolutely not. King Features would go nuts if I tried to run something for 2 weeks. But Universal was more understanding because they had the website and they wanted the clicks. Now the business had changed to where some people were reading it in the paper, a lot of people were getting it on their tablets and that sort of thing. So now they were more understanding about you want to do a story. But my challenge from the beginning has been to consistently, for the first 2 or 3 years, keep reintroducing the characters to you in ways that it's not going to duplicate anything, but you're going to get to know them. You're going to get to know their attributes. And so that you'll eventually care about the character. And when I started in the business in 1980, doing the dailies and the Sundays, that was something I always had to think about. Gee, this character isn't known yet, or so for the first, I don't know, year or two, I won't presume that anyone knows who this is and what they're about. So little by little by little, they will, and then they'll start to care about the character, and then we can move along. It's exactly the same as writing a drama or situation comedy. A situation comedy, there's so the exactly how it is stated. There's a situation, and in this amount of time, the situation is resolved, and now you can watch these in any order. Versus a comedic soap opera like Soap or something, where and there are story arcs throughout, but it's a comedic show. So there's two ways of looking at it. So every day I would write a tiny little sitcom that would be 2, 3, or 4 panels. There'd be a joke. The next day we begin again.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So with the Muppets,
Yeah.
is this something that was assigned to you, or is this something that you pitched and
Oh no, I didn't pitch it. I would
oh,
have never done that. No. No, 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 no. My audition lasted 10 months.
okay.
Yeah, let that sink in, everybody. Uh, I didn't know anything about it. That was not a world that when I was 22 years old, I could have ever dreamt of being in. I was a huge Jim Henson fan, a huge Muppets fan. The Muppets had been on for a year. This television show had been on for a year. When Jim had decided in 1978 that at some point he would stop production of the show and move on to something else and do the movies and whatnot. And during those 2 years, King Features and Henson Associates, auditioned around 200 different people. And by the time I got involved, it was 1980. And I had met Mort Walker, the creator of Beetle Bailey and High and Lois and many other things, and a great man. And he had taken an interest in me and knew that I do funny animals, and he liked me. And he was out playing golf with Bill Yates, the head of King Features, and Bill was lamenting the fact that they had had a development deal with Henson for 2 years to find someone that could write and draw the Muppets for the whole world, the Muppet Show. And their contract was about up, and they hadn't found anyone. And Mort said, in his usual deadpan humor thing, that's a frog and a pig, right? Bill says, yeah. He says, well, there's this hippie kid, and he draws funny animals. He's pretty good. And why don't you call him? That was the phone call. And a week or two later, I brought in, as I said, I knew the Muppets very well. But of course, I had never dreamed this would ever happen. Also, there was no artwork on the Muppets, and videotape didn't exist to a consumer. So I had to just fly by the seat of my pants and go get some Hallmark cards and things like that, and a couple of Sesame Street books that Michael K. Frith had illustrated, which he would eventually become my boss, along with Jim, and see how the Muppets were put together, So and sort of put it in my head. So anyway, I did some. I brought them to Bill. He liked them. He sent them over to Henson. They liked them. Bill asked me for more. Then he asked me for more, and I just decided that I would keep on drawing. And then one day I got invited to 117 East 69th Street, that's the brownstone that was the Muppet headquarters. It was the most silly and opulent and incredibly beautiful place that I'd ever been in my life. And I met Michael, and they were non-committal but very, very kind. And anyway, I walked out of there saying, I'm going to be the Muppets cartoonist. I'm going to work for Jim Henson. This will be my home. I didn't say it to anybody else, but I said it to me. And I went home and I continued to draw it and write it. And I, got my brother writing as well. And we kept sending it in pencil over and over and over again. And King Feature says, we can't pay you. I said, that's okay. My thought was, until you tell me I'm not, I'm going to pretend I am. and I just did it. I had a good gig already with Super Colonel Comics working for Weekly Reader. So it was just every night and every breath I took until they would call me and say, I'm sorry, someone else got it. Or congratulations, it's your job. When it finally happened, when I got the call, Bill had called me a couple of days before and said, something's going on over there, and it's probably not good for you. It might not be good for you. But they're getting ready to announce something, and they've been looking at people on their own too. And I said, oh yeah, I know. Marie Severin, who was a big hero of mine, was one of the people that was working on it. And so I figured, well, but I wouldn't let my mind go there.
Mhm.
And I got off the phone and I was a little upset, that maybe I didn't get it. But I said, well, boy, uh, they didn't tell you you don't have it yet. And it's just, Bill's just got a feeling
Mhm.
because he's hearing rumblings and it's not coming from their office. It's coming from, somewhere over there at 117. And the phone rang very quickly thereafter. And it was Jerry Jewell, the head writer of the Muppets.
Mhm.
And when I asked him why he was calling me, he said, well, didn't Michael call you? Jim chose you. You've had the job for the last month.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, there you go.
There had to be a challenge writing because these are characters who were on TV that had very big personalities. And then you had to sort of take those personalities, put them in print. So when people are reading it, they're hearing those voices, they're hearing let's say, Miss Piggy's sassiness or in the
Mhm.
written form. How
Mhm.
did you manage to do that?
Jim said, well, the short answer is Jerry Jewell uh, talking with me. I was a fan, and we would talk quite a bit about the personalities of the characters. Michael Frith, who became, he was my art director for the whole time I was with Henson. Uh, Michael was very engaged with all the characters. I was immersed in it. Uh, and then Jim, the way that Jim put it, when I finally met Jim about a month later, and Jim said, the gags are good. The gags are good. The stories are good. It's getting there. And then he talked to me about the art. He said, some of these drawings are very good. And some of these are even great. But Guy, we don't want great. We want wonderful. And I'm like, how do I do wonderful? I didn't say that. I'm just in my head going, how do I do wonderful? Well, this was the way that Jim taught. So he held his hand up and just started being Kermit. And I'm watching him and I'm listening to him as he's emoting with just his hand. No Kermit, obviously, there, just emoting with his hand. And I'm going, oh, wait a minute. I get it now. That was how Jim taught. He hired you because he vibed with you and he wasn't going to tell you how to do it. He felt that he had brought you in for a reason and that you were going to figure it out. And that's how he was the greatest boss because, of course, you would try everything to please him. And in this case, what this was, you see, I had been approaching it. I'm understanding there's a script and I'm learning the characters and we're writing the characters. And Michael was teaching me how to draw the puppets. But what Jim was getting at was this. You see, I had been used to If I had a job with Warner Brothers or Disney, looking at a picture of Lady and the Tramp that had been drawn by this Disney artist, and then copying that style and doing turnarounds and everything until I felt comfortable with the style, and then I would draw other things. So I'm going from uh, with Warner Brothers. If I was doing Chuck Jones stuff, I would draw like Chuck Jones, and or Chris Freeling, whoever it happened to be. But here, so that's taking two dimensions and to two dimensions. But what you just said, it's the wonderfulness of the show. It's the movement. It's the life. You see, there was life in that hand that Jim was showing me. And somehow we had to get the movement, the color, and everything into pictures this size, little postage stamps in black and white and color on Sunday. And that was what my task was. And so I began to take liberties with the way that that the puppets actually were, and tried to put some animation into it, some movement into my line, life into my line, life into their faces. Take away the backgrounds, unclutter things, get them, moving within the spaces that I had, and then hope for the best.
Is there a sense of freedom that came with going from draw like Chuck Jones to draw like Guy Gilchrist in that?
Well, I don't know. I don't know when it exactly was that I found my voice, because what I was doing that at that point was learning how to, try to draw like Jim and Michael. You know, Jim had chosen me and Michael had chosen me because we all loved Pogo, and we had Michael and I had similar styles of art. Michael being way, way, way up on Mount Olympus, and me down there going like, "Can I have a pencil?" You know, but still, we were, I think that Jim thought of me as sort of Michael Jr.
Mhm.
You know, um, and I had the writing too.
Mhm.
But uh, I found my voice somewhere during that time, because even though it was my voice and Michael's and it's Jim's voice, but finding myself and my style, I had to draw thousands and thousands and thousands of drawings. I had to draw more than I ever had in my entire life. And Jim was approving every strip and looking at everything. And we had a lot of approval processes to go through. And so for, for everything that the public ever saw, there were hundreds of drawings that I was doing. I was working day and night, immersed completely into this thing and learning as fast as I could, 150 million people. And we only had a few weeks to get ready, that's how it felt. I'm writing the whole thing down in a book. It's a real long story, but the book will be out in a little bit. Um, and anyway, so there comes a time uh, when something kicks in, um, that it's more you. You see, your style is always a combination of three things. It's who you like, your heroes, who you copy, up here, or whoever your influences are, and they'll change over the years, but you have these influences. And just like your favorite music, your favorite cartoons will be the ones from when you were 8 to 12. Always, always. That's the best stuff, and everything else sucks. You know how that goes.
Yeah.
So, but your style is a combination of who do you love, and who influenced you. What do you know, and what do you not know?
Mhm.
And you put those together, and that's your style. And so the longer that you go through life and the more drawings you do, uh, you wind up knowing more and being freer with the knowledge that you have up here as you're beginning to understand the masters a bit that have always been your masters. And so then your voice begins to come through, because whatever those invisible chains were of what you didn't know, they fall away, you see.
There's also something really incredible with your art. And I saw it at Terrificon last year, and I see it on your Facebook post that when people come to you to get something signed or commissioned or something like that, comic fans are like, oh, it's cool. I got a so and so Spider-Man. But when people come up to you, it is a very personal and very almost at times emotional experience. They're giddy to be there to see what you've done because you've had such an impact on their lives, whether it's growing up and all that. Talk a little bit about what that's like, the interaction with fans and how much your art means to them.
Oh, it's everything. I didn't have a lot of chance of a chance besides doing book tours and promotional tours and things over all of these years, because I've been in production my whole life. I did a lot of motivational speaking through the years, and I even had a cartoonist academy for 7 years in Connecticut. But interaction with fans, I was very busy. And the funny thing happens when you're drawing for a lot of years. Your kids grow up, and here you are, and it's beautiful and lovely to hear the stories and to see the three generations now, because the characters I've been blessed to draw and write and create in some cases have been around, for all of that long. And, parents that had the book as a child, now they're reading it to their kids, and grandparents are reading it to their grandchildren and all of that. And so I've been around your lives my whole life with my art, and the art is the star, not Guy. The Kermit is the star. Baby Piggy is the star. The Ninja Turtles are the star. Tom and Jerry is the star. However it is. I try to realize that I've been incredibly blessed to work with some of the greatest people that ever created anything. And so I understand that the love that comes to me at the table at a con, I am a vessel to accept these things, like a receptacle, and then to shoot them out into the universe, to Jim, to everyone that's up there with Jim over the rainbow, and then those like Frank and Dave that are still with us, but they're not out there doing it. I understand that the love that I feel for Jim and the respect that I have, and how much not just his characters, but his character, his philosophy means to me, is I see that in your eyes. I see that. That's our vibe. That's our contact. And so I try to be the best representative of all of those incredible men that I can be for you at that moment. It's the only thing that matters. I'm asked all the time, who is your favorite character to draw? And I said, who would you like? My favorite character is the one I'm drawing for you right now. It's the only one that matters. I'm used to having an audience of 1 million people or 150 million people. I have an audience of one with you. What do you want to do? Mm-hmm. And that's my attitude toward it. And so it's very affirming, and it's really super cool and a blast to hang with you.
Just one more question is that you've done the comic strips, you've done children's books, you've done stuff from minor league baseball, advertising, things like that. Could you have seen a life where you picked one and just did that, or did you need to do all of these to become the complete artist that you are?
Don't know. I don't know. New York was closer than LA. I could get on a train at 12 and go into New York, just lie to my parents, tell them I was going over to Fred's house to play baseball for the weekend and going to New York. But I couldn't do that with LA. Had I fallen into animation, um, and somehow got my own studio and all of that, and was able to do all of that, maybe, but probably not. Probably not. I wound up doing all of those things because they were opportunities that came along to further my connection and my story, the voice that I had. I always say I'm a writer that hired the cheapest illustrator that he could find, and that's very, very true. I'm always telling a story, so that was the most important thing. Was the story. Uh, no matter who the characters were, the ideas in my mind are still the same. Um, Although I'm not a political person or anything like that. I don't get into that stuff in my work. I have my belief system about loving each other, taking care of each other, being kind to each other, celebrating the differences by having fun with it all, and and the silliness of all of that. And that's always been the way that I am. And so I think that maybe that comes through. I hope. Um, and So the one thing I will say is I'm a very hard worker. Um, and I like to stay busy. So when things come along that it's a project that I think is cool, I, if I possibly can, I say yes. If it's not cool with me, I don't do it no matter what the money's like. And if it is cool with me, then we talk about the money later usually. And I just get to it. And I've been very, very fortunate in that. That seems to have worked out very well.
Could you ever see yourself doing a Batman, a Superman, something like that?
Oh, no, I'm just, I did a fairly realistic feature for around 4 years called Your Angels Speak. And it was a spiritual feature that was in the paper. And so I drew fairly realistically. And my idea was that I would draw the angels as very beautiful women and beautiful men, like in a comic book, and then say something that might be comforting. So I did that, and those books will be out on the digital platform soon because they're sort of lost to history. Um, I may have been able to do it, but I found the universality of no matter when we look at Superman, there's all this talk about diversity now in comics and all of that. And oh, by the way, and he's my favorite superhero, Superman, because I don't think that because there wouldn't be any other superheroes if it was for him. So, and I would practice like crazy, trying to draw like Joe Shuster and the people that the 1940s Superman, the Wayne Boring Superman, all that, and also the same like Bill Finger, Jerry Robinson, uh, Batman. But I was always really drawn to characters like Woody Woodpecker, the very first character that my favorite cartoon character, uh, because no matter who you are, where you come from, what age you are, or anything, you're being entertained by that character. something in that character's personality is you, you know? And you don't have to look around if you're this color, this color, this color, this color, wherever you are, you know, that character appeals to you and you're finding something that you love about that. And that, again, the universal aspect of that, that it speaks to everyone. I understood that Mickey Mouse spoke to everyone. I knew that instinctively, when I was a kid. And we look at the Muppets, which is the thing that I'm most, known for, uh, of all the stuff that I did. And look at, they're all different colors and they're this crazy family. I love that. So that's where that's where I live. So maybe if I've been good at anything, maybe that's the reason.
Where can fans find you? What can fans be looking forward to in the upcoming year?
Well, you can. We had a weird thing that just happened with my old website, which is A Guy Gilchrist Productions, which we've had forever, where through a bunch of strangeness, it went away. It just said bye bye. So now we're going to have GuyGilchrist.com, but it's not around yet. But you can go find me everywhere on social. I'm everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. And it's Guy Gilchrist or Guy F Gilchrist on Instagram. You can find me everywhere. We have a great Facebook page called A Guy Gilchrist Production. And it's harder to ignore me than it is to find on the web and social and all of that good stuff. And in regard to what can we be looking forward to, well, the tours will be up on our page and all of that. But I've written 60 or 70 books over the years, the Nightlights books, Tiny Dinos, Mud Pie, and all of that. And all of those are going up on Apple book, and a bunch of them already are. And also on Kindle. So the digital platforms, all of those books that you may have had as a kid, they're all going to be there and digitally restored and looking more beautiful than ever. Plus, we're taking a lot of the stuff like the Angels and like the Mud Pie comics and stuff that haven't been seen in 30 years, things like that, 40 years, since it was just in a newspaper. And now there are going to be books on all of that. So by the end of this year, we'll have about 60 some odd books up. And my very first memoir, which is going to be about the time from 1980 to 1990, when I was with Jim. And that book is going to be out on digital platforms. I can guarantee that as far as the print and the audio version. I don't know when, but I can guarantee that this year we will have a book, and it's somebody called Jim Henson, the Muppets, and me.
That's awesome.
All of the stories will be there.
And we are back. What an incredible dude. You heard him talk about the grind of doing these comic strips. I mean, it really is. We've spoken to other folks who've done comic strips too. You can't take any time off. There's one needed every week. And the sacrifices he's made for his work is really incredible. And the fact that Jim Henson, Jim Henson, Walt Disney, two people who changed the landscape of really entertainment, not only for children, but for adults as well. And Jim picked him to do the drawings for his work. And as he said, he's continuing Jim's legacy right now. So what an incredible guy. We need to get Guy back on because it is talking about his Ninja Turtles and the other stuff he's worked on. We got to dig deeper into that. So, Guy, thank you so much. Thank you guys for listening, for watching. Please remember, rate, review, subscribe. We are only, as of right now, 2 subs away from 900 on YouTube. Please give us those subs. Let us get up to 1,000 and we'll see what happens from there. So have a wonderful weekend and we will see you next week.